So, welcome to tonight's show. We're fortunate to have with us Jacqui Taylor Rose. She's going to talk to us about the White Pass and Yukon Route Railroad in Skagway. I've really been looking forward to a chance to talk with her. So, let me bring her in and she can give us a little of her background. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Jacqui, and your work with the railroad, and we'll get started.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hello from Skagway, Alaska. I'm Jacqui Taylor Rose. I'm the manager of marketing and product development here at the White Pass and Yukon Route. I've been with the railroad for 14 years. I started as a tour guide and worked my way up through our passenger operations department. And I was lucky enough to get the position here on the marketing side of things a few years ago. And it's been such fun to grow up through the company and yeah, really love it here. It's such an interesting place to work, and I think it's not many people get to say they work for a narrow gauge railroad in Alaska, so I feel quite fortunate to be a part of the company.
Well, and congratulations on your advancement through the ranks. It's kind of interesting because I have railroad blood in me. My grandfather was an engineer for the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railway back in the steam engine days. I had an uncle that was an engineer in modern times for Santa Fe Railway, and then he went to Amtrak. I had two cousins that were dispatchers, all for the railroad. And I almost got to go to work for the railroad, but my eyes were so bad, and that was way before you could get LASIKs and get things fixed, that I was blind basically without my glasses. And so because I was trying to get a job as a conductor, my uncle was going to pull some strings for me, but he couldn't get me past the physical. So should we start with the video?
Yeah, that'd be great. It's a nice introduction to our history and then takes you into what our operations are like today.
Okay, so we'll start with that. Okay, so that was very nice.
Yeah, we love playing that video. We use it a lot for getting our employees jazzed up during their first few days of work when our season begins. We send it on board to all the cruise ships as a teaser for folks to book the excursion with us. So just a nice introduction to what it took to build the railroad over 121 years ago, to what it's like to ride the train when you visit Skagway.
Okay, so let's say that I get off my ship and I want to ride the train. First of all, let me ask this question: how important are reservations?
Absolutely necessary. During a typical summer, we can have up to 10,000 passengers in town a day. And that means that everyone is looking for things to do in Skagway. So it's best to book your excursion ahead of time. And that way you get the best rates and you'll know you'll have a seat on the departure of your choice.
Okay, so we have one question. I'll just go ahead and ask this one. Somebody popped up. What are the differences between the 2.7 hour tour and the 8 hour tour?
Yeah, so we have one set of tracks that we use. We don't have a big roundabout that you come up one side of the valley and down the other side. So it's one set of tracks. The 2 hour and 45-minute excursion takes you up to the White Pass summit, which is about 20 miles from downtown Skagway. And that's where you'll reach a small loop that we just put up in the summit in 2018. And that turns our train around and it comes back to town. So you're covering 40 miles round trip, heading up what we consider one of the most scenic portions of the rail. So from Tidewater here, in Skagway at the port, then heading up 3,000 feet in elevation. So lots of twists and turns through the mountain passes, bridges, tunnels, and get you up to the summit to turn around.
Okay.
Yeah, and then the 8 hour excursion takes you over our entire operational line from Skagway at mile 0 up to mile 67.5 in Carcross, which is actually in the Yukon Territory. You'll have a 45-minute layover at Lake Bennett, which is this really secluded spot along the rail. Then you'll reboard the train to have lunch as you head into Carcross. And you disembark there and you actually get on buses to take you south back to Skagway. So there'll be bus and motor coach returns if you decide to do the full day.
Okay, so that would be a 4 hour train ride up, or do you do a 4 hour train ride back?
Yeah, you can do the tour in reverse as well.
In reverse. Okay, now if they take your bus, it just comes from Carcross straight back. Does it make any stops or?
If there's time, we try and get people to Emerald Lake. It's up in the Yukon, just a few miles north of Carcross, and it's gorgeous. You kind of have to see it to believe it. This emerald green blue tint to the lake, so it's really pretty. And we try to get as many people up there as possible before it's time to come down to Skagway. And of course, there's always a few photo stops along the way, just to add to the tour. It's a nice way to have not only the rail portion, but also get to see a little bit of the highway.
Okay, yeah, because I was going to say I've driven into Emerald Lake twice. The last time we had our granddaughter, and so on the way back we stopped at Tootsie Lake, the sled dog adventure, or Tagish Lake sled dog adventure, and that was a lot of fun. We had a good time with that. Obviously, that's not something you can do with a train with a bus load of people, but when you're driving, we got to do that. I would say, and it's kind of interesting because driving up the highway, you see the train and the tracks on the other side of the valley. Mm-hmm. And so where does the train cross back from the far side of that valley to, because it doesn't, at some point it passes underneath the highway to go over to Lake Bennett, or is Lake Bennett
Yeah, so there's only a few spots where the train will actually meet up with the Klondike Highway. The first is Fraser, British Columbia, which is mile 27 on our tracks, and that's where you'll go through Canadian customs getting into BC and Yukon. And then the next crossing is at Log Cabin, which is a few miles down the road from Fraser, and that you won't see the highway again from Log Cabin until you get into Carcross. So it's completely separate from the road system on the northern half of our tracks.
Yeah, and I knew that somewhere it went across because you guys go to Lake Bennett and the highway doesn't. You can't get to Lake Bennett on the highway. That's one of the big differences from driving in or taking strictly a bus tour. You miss that Lake Bennett, and my understanding is that is absolutely fantastic.
It's definitely a highlight of a trip if you decide to do the longer excursion.
Okay, and so so from a time perspective, what time of day do you depart from Skagway headed into the Yukon Territory, or in towards up the hill?
So typically you'll find our morning excursions heading out to do the longest distances. So our full day excursions usually head out between 7:45, between 7:45 and 8:30. And then our shorter trips to the summit and to Fraser have multiple departures throughout the day.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Now, so what's the best way for somebody to make reservations?
We always like to first tell people to book through the cruise line. If you're deciding to come to visit Skagway, majority of people are seeing it first through a cruise ship. It's a perfect stop on your cruise. And the nice part about Skagway is a lot of the cruise lines build in a full day itinerary in Skagway. So you'll have a chance to come in early, about 7 a.m., and you won't leave until later in the day. So if you're looking at one of those longer rail tours, ensure that your itinerary has a full stay in Skagway. And if you're deciding to come over the road, then you have a little bit more time to decide what you want to do. But first folks will see us off cruise ships. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And I'm personally not a huge fan of booking through the cruise line. I typically find I get a little better deal if I book directly with vendors.
Yeah.
Again, as I told you in the pre-show, I'm a little bit on the thrifty side.
Yeah, I don't blame you. Those vacation dollars are precious, and it's good to get the most bang for your buck. I will say the biggest benefit to booking through the cruise line with White Pass is all of the piers in Skagway have railroad tracks on them. And by booking through the cruise line, you'll have access to the trains directly on the pier. So it alleviates the transfer between your dock and downtown Skagway, where you board the train here at our depot on 2nd Avenue. So that's just a nice benefit of booking through the ship, knowing they'll have the pierside service.
Yeah, and I would agree 100% with that there is some convenience. Though the one thing I'll say about Skagway is all of the towns I've visited in Alaska, it is far and away, it and Seward, I guess, would be the two towns I would say that are the most walkable. And I think Skagway has an advantage in that Skagway is completely flat, whereas Seward, there's some hills. And my wife travels with a wheelchair, hence the name of the channel and some of my backstory there. But, I pushed the wheelchair up over one of the hills to go to the other side of town, and I wish I'd walked around the boardwalk, which was flat and, a lot farther, but it would have been a little easier than going up the hill. So I'm a fan of towns that are really, really flat, which make Ketchikan not so wheelchair friendly.
Just stay by the water, you'll be okay.
Yeah, exactly. So that leads me to, let me ask this question, and I can pop up the pictures if you want them up. For passengers that travel with mobility devices, how accessible is the train? And excuse me, just one second. I'm trying to get my mouse where I can find it. I have two screens. So how accessible is the train? And how much space do you have for wheelchair passengers? Because I know sometimes on a cruise ship there can be 5 or 10 or 15 passengers that are using mobility devices. Sometimes it seems more depending on the ship and the line. So what's the capacity? I guess is the best way to ask this.
Yeah, absolutely. So our train consists have between usually 12 to 15, 16 cars on them, and each train will have up to 2 lift cars on them. So we have a lift capable cars that seat room for about 4 tie downs with for wheelchairs, And then we have seating capacity within those cars. Thanks for the photo. That's a nice visual just to give you an idea. And seating capacity anywhere between about 24 to 30 passengers within that lift coach. So it gives us a chance to be really accessible for people that are bringing their mobility devices with them on the cruise. It allows you to bring a wheelchair or a motorized scooter. Even if you're using a cane or a walker, the lift cars are a really great way to avoid the 5 steep stairs onto the coach, and allows you to sit with, we try and accommodate as many of your travel companions as possible, but definitely gives you a chance if you'd like to transfer to one of the bench seats and sit with your travel companions. It's a great way to make sure everyone can enjoy the excursion here in Skagway on the train.
Okay. Go ahead.
We typically recommend the White Pass Summit excursion just because you're on the train the entire time. It takes you, that was that shorter 2-hour and 45-minute trip up to the summit and back, and still giving you great opportunity for photos and learning all about the history of the Klondike Gold Rush, as well as learning what life is like in Skagway, small town Alaska, and giving you some insight on, those kind of wild and crazy times of building a mountain narrow gauge railroad in 1898. And the other excursion that can accommodate with the lift is the Fraser Excursion. And that is our train that we partner with a lot of the different motor coach companies in town. And so that train will have a lift car, and the bus meeting at the other end will also have the accommodations that anyone would need in a wheelchair or scooter.
Okay, so in other words, some of the let's call them third-party vendors, then you partner with them, and they can. Would that be so? Let's say that somebody, and you said that goes to Bennett. No, Fraser.
Unfortunately, our Bennett train does not have a lift car on it, and that also goes for our steam excursion. We have a 1947 steam locomotive that pulls our lightest train cars, up to 6 of them. They're the wood frame versus the metal framed passenger coaches that have the lift accessibility. So yeah, so definitely the Summit Excursion I think is the best choice, and then Fraser is a close second.
Okay, and so Pam asked a question here. She's probably not going to like the answer. Pam said, "Is the bus coming back on a very windy road with drop-offs?"
Yes, Pam. We are in a very tight glaciated valley here in Skagway. So we sit right at the bottom of it where the fjord, the Pacific Ocean, meets Skagway. And to get out of Skagway, you have to climb over a mountain pass over 3,000 feet in elevation. And that means some winding roads, definitely some winding tracks up and through the mountains to gain that elevation. So I'm sorry to say yes, but that road comes with some beautiful scenery and landscapes and great photo opportunities. So it's definitely worth it if you can stomach it.
Okay, and you don't do a round trip Bennett, right? It's Bennett is trade for a bus coming back.
Yeah, it's a round trip train bus.
Train bus. Okay, yeah. So and it's interesting because my wife's a little agrophobic, and she's not a real fan of the highway. She's less of a fan when I'm looking off the edge of the cliff while I'm driving. And I'm bad about that. Then, of course, when I'm looking off the cliff, I'm going that way.
Yeah.
So.
At least you can leave the driving up to the train if you decide to take that route.
So, yeah, I think you would be better off, Pam, on the train up and the train back. Though you will see some pretty sheer drop-off. In fact, if my memory serves me right in the research I did on today's video for Skagway, there's a place that it's almost 1,000 feet down along the train tracks.
As you're crossing some of the bridges, you can look straight down to the valley floor, so it leaves you pretty breathless when you realize that it was carved out of the mountainside granite cliffs with black blasting powder and hand-driven tools to create the railbed. It's pretty spectacular what they did to make White Pass happen.
Yeah, and that was exactly the where it was. I think it was talking about. It was talking about them having to use lines to come down the side of the cliff to drill the holes, to put the powder in, to blow the rock off to make the shelf.
Uh-huh. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, I would not have wanted to work on that railway. We did when we did a southbound, and so we did the train from Anchorage over to Seward, and of course they have some of that same kind of really tight rock wall, little shelf the track is on, cliff down beside it, and that was a lot of fun too. We enjoyed that. Like I said, I'm a huge train fan, so I'm looking forward to a chance to ride your railway. So what else should people know about coming to Skagway for riding the train?
I think I like that we've covered kind of the different booking options and the benefits to booking through the cruise line, and knowing that you are able to come downtown if you'd like and explore your options that way. And I do appreciate you asking that, book early. You don't want to be disappointed when you get to Skagway. It's good to do your research ahead of time and know which route will best suit your vacation itinerary and what you'd like to see and get from the train. I think it's also neat to kind of dive into a little bit of that Gold Rush history and know what you're getting into with visiting Skagway and what the Gold Rush meant for the town and the construction of the railroad and how it's really helped make Skagway thrive and what it's done to help the Yukon Territory. We were a supply line between Skagway and the Yukon that really helped it grow. So I think if you're into history, I think doing a little bit of research ahead of time really makes you appreciate what Skagway's all about in our history. Yep.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I would agree with that. Like I said, I was doing some research today for the Skagway video. There was just kind of like a history of Skagway, and so I dug into like Daia and the Chilkoot Trail and the White Pass and how it got started and the railroad. And it's kind of interesting that the train was the difference probably in survival and failure. That, and they had that Palm Sunday avalanche, which was really hard on people on the Chilkoot Trail as well. It just made Skagway that much more appealing. Though the nickname for what the trail that they used was kind of brutal. They called it the Dead Horse Trail because there were so many horses that died in that road. It was kind of interesting because in the one place and in the video I talked about it today that you guys, when that railroad was built, it turned what was days of excruciating work to get out of Skagway up to the summit into a 3-hour train ride.
Yeah, it really changes your perspective, realizing that what it took to take your 2,000 pounds of required goods to get into Canada to then go on to the gold fields in Dawson City over 500 miles away. You had to carry that 2,000 pounds of goods on your back up and down these trails. Maybe you had enough money to get a pack animal to help you with that movement. But I mean, considering 20, 30 times up and down the pass, taking, what you could carry on your back, leaving it up the trail, going back for the rest. And it's incredible to think the drive of the prospectors and stampeders that came in 1897 before that to really strike it rich and take that gamble on whether or not you were going to come out of the Klondike region with a little bit of gold, a lot of gold, or absolutely nothing.
And a lot came out with absolutely nothing. But Skagway is a fascinating town. I thought the history was amazing. I'm fortunate I have an acquaintance that lives in Whitehorse, a gentleman named Murray Lundberg. I don't know if you know Murray or not.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a small region, so most of the time you'll find that we know each other.
Well, that's kind of why I mentioned it, because he's been on and done a video. He was the most successful guest I've ever had. I've had over 5,400 views on a video series he did on 5 ports in the Inside Passage. But like I said, it's just amazing. His photographs, his blog are huge. I love that area. If I was a younger man and healthier, I would probably be looking to live up in that part of the world because it is just breathtakingly beautiful. Like I said, I love it up there. So, okay. So I had Pam ask another question here. She said, is there time to do the train and then plus a pan for gold excursion? So like, do you get back in time for somebody to do like go out to Liarsville? That's the
Absolutely.
panning for gold, I think, is there.
Yeah, absolutely. There's time. That's the nice part about taking, especially the summit excursion. You're on the train for those little less than 3 hours, and there's usually an option to get off in downtown when you get in. And booking another excursion to go and complement the train is perfect, whether you want to pan for gold or take a streetcar tour, even just walking downtown Skagway and exploring the historic district and checking out the museums. And we're so lucky to be part of the National Park Service system and having NPS in town with their beautiful museum and visitor center next door to our depot. It's the perfect way to take what you just experienced on the train and really translate it to what life was like in the gold rush through their displays and videos and tours around downtown Skagway. There's definitely time to explore not only the train, but getting your fill of Skagway while you're here in town.
Okay, and you said now. So let me ask a question. Of course, I know everything depends on the schedule of the ship, but if you wanted to do Liarsville, which is like I said, the salmon bake and the gold panning, would it be better to try to book a really early train trip, or do you have time in like an after the Liarsville event to try to do it? Which would be the better way to schedule that?
I think it's totally up to you whether you want to take a quick break after the train in the morning and have lunch in downtown, or vice versa. Maybe you want to sleep in a little bit and book book your tours a little later in the day. But the nice thing about Skagway is we're here for our cruise ship passengers and our visitors off the road, that we're here to work for our 5 months out of the year, and we're going to be open as long as we can and accommodating a lot of different tour times throughout the day. So it's a pretty safe that you can partner the train and another tour, whether you want to do train first or train later in the afternoon.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that. Do we have any more questions? I know Pam asked, Marvin said he wanted to do the long trip next year. He did the short trip. Let me just go down through here. And Pam, yeah, I'm sure you could fit in the zip line as well. I'm actually going to do a video on some of the outdoor excursions coming up. I'm just trying to work my way through all of the things to do in Skagway. I think when it's done, it's going to be one fairly long video port guide to Skagway, because there's just so many things to do. You've got trails to walk, you've got zip lines, you've got Liarsville, you've got the hike out to Daia. Then of course you could sneak over to Haines. So there's just a lot to do in Skagway. Yeah,
absolutely. There's something for everybody in Skagway, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, well, listen, I really appreciate you being around. If you'll hang around for just a minute, Jacqui, afterwards, I'm going to say goodbye to these folks, and then you and I can chat afterwards. I really appreciate you being on as a guest. You've done a great job. I want to thank all of our people that have been on the show today. I really appreciate it. When you show up and watch, it makes the whole thing worthwhile. There'll be, if you're watching on the replay, there's going to be a link up here for the video on Wednesday. I'm releasing a Bonaire video, and then next Monday we're going to do a live show on Bonaire with a Bonaire tour guide. So you get a chance to go from Alaska to the Caribbean and warm up a little bit. And we'll see you guys next time.